Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back to the Thrive Co-Living Communities podcast, starting on YouTube, and then it's also on all the podcast stations, depending on how you found us. I'm really happy today. I've been looking forward to this topic for a long time. We've got Bonnie Stith, who is a consultant and coach with Apex Leadership and Cyber Coaching. She is the former director of the Center for Cyber Intelligence for the CIA. So she brings a deep background and understanding of cyber security. And then we have John Langford, who's with USI Insurance. He's a commercial insurance broker. USI Insurance is headquartered in Valhalla, New York, and he is located near Valhalla Golf Course in Louisville, Kentucky. So he probably feels right at home. So welcome to both of you. This is such a hot topic. There's a lot of focus on it, maybe more focus and attention on it in the business community than ever before. I don't know, but so let's get started. Maybe we'll start with Bonnie, and they're going to ask questions of each other. They're probably not going to have any questions for me, but I'll keep things rolling too. So Bonnie, we've been more sensitized to this risk with two recent attacks, the Colonial Pipeline, then there's the solar winds from a couple of years ago. Talk to us about what's going on, who's doing it, what are some of the greatest risks to businesses. Most of our audience will be small business people, but some with large corporations. So give us the lay of the land. What's this risk about?
Well, to easily define it, the risk is about what are you holding that is of value to you, and what are you holding that is of value to others. That's really what the risk is about. I mean, there was a time when we didn't, carry these magic devices in our hands everywhere we went, and we typed on manual typewriters, and it was all on paper. And so if somebody wanted to get to that secret that you didn't want them to have, they had to get to the paper that the secret was on. Now, virtually everything that anybody would want to have is in a database someplace, in a data lake, in a data cloud. I mean, it's somewhere, that somebody with enough time and intent can get to. And I think that's the piece that's probably the most intriguing in the space, because when you say, well, who would care about me? Well, you're right. Maybe nobody, but your kids, if they want an inheritance. However, it could also be that people that want to use your identity to get money, or use your identity to do something else, to get credentials to go someplace else, or use some other, piece of information about you to get something, or get into another computer so that they can get even more. All of those things are bought and sold, and all of those things are very, very fungible and of great interest to people with malintent. So in this space, there was a time when the Target attack, many years ago, I mean, it's been like 10 or 15 years ago, when Target got hacked. And the big deal was everybody's PIN numbers got stolen. And so I always thought of Target as the $100 store. I mean, if I walk in, it's $100. And I don't typically carry $100 around in my pocket. So who wanted to use a credit card at Target? And so, I mean, and the Target litigation is continuing probably even to today, because after their insurers paid off, they wanted to go after more insurance to try and, again, recoup some of the losses that they had, because it was a tremendous loss to them. So you think about how long that goes. I mean, but data has grown, and the intent and certainly the opportunity has grown by those that want to get your data, and certainly the effort in those who want to keep your data has grown. So you've really got kind of a standoff in that space, because that data is valuable. There's stuff there. I mean, and you can kind of classify the threat as well. There's the nation state, right? So what do they want to do? Well, they want to steal. I mean, it's I noticed the other day that, that China's just launched a new aircraft carrier. I'd be interested to know where that technology came from. I have a pretty good idea, but, they want to disrupt. So they want to show you that they can. If you think about the Sony hacks of a few years back, where North Korea hacked Sony over a really bad movie. It all comes back down to this intent thing, but to show you they can, to get their point across. We worry a lot about our infrastructure, our power grids, our water supplies, our towns, right? There's towns that when they get hacked, you have to show up and pay your water bill in person because you can't pay it online. There's no records anymore. And imagine what that's like for the town to pay payroll and all of those other things they've got to do. Basically, going back to the old bookkeeping days, right? So all of that stuff is out there. And so there are those attackers out there that want to get to it. The other piece of it, though, for businesses is what happens to your company. What's the embarrassment piece to your company? There's a reputational risk that goes on. And John, I see you nodding your head. It might be that your data is not worth a lot, but what happens when Equifax, who's supposed to be the guardian of all data, right, gets hacked?
Yeah.
These are the guys that tell you whether you're creditworthy or not. They can't even protect your doggone information. And now, guess what? You're going to buy protection for your identity. Who do you think you're buying it from? Equifax. Okay? So through some sort of strange, virtual kind of strange world, now the guy that couldn't keep your data, you're paying to protect your data, or your identity anyway, because they're not protecting your data anymore, they're protecting your identity. So if your identity data is out there and somebody does identity theft, then they will essentially, give you some sort of protection up to a certain amount. So I don't know how this works. I think it's fascinating. It's great to be a capitalist. So, so that said, here we are now sitting at home, right? So, the magic day in March arrived. Everybody was sent home. The country shut down. All of those people took their computers home with them. And all of them started dialing into those companies from their homes, right? And you can say, wow, it's all wireless. I don't care. Basically, what you've done is you've created a larger attack space for people that want to get to you. Because now it's all in people's houses. And how many people have their router secure? How many people upload virus protection? I know, John, you're just your eyes are rolling. You're like, what? Yeah, I know. I know you hear this all the time, right? It's
singing his song.
How many people do these just routine hygiene things to try to keep themselves, out of trouble, much less worry about their company. And then you got the companies that have got all of these people coming back and forth with who knows what hooked up to their computers or in their data or viruses, or they're so busy they're clicking on links they shouldn't be clicking on. There's just so much ebb and flow happening right now, and it's happening so fast that, this is like an attacker's dream. Because you as a defender have to protect, you have to defend every single time. As an attacker, I just got to get in once. That's it. And maybe I get to that great place like the Colonial Pipeline. How many people had ever heard of the Colonial Pipeline before? There was no, gas being delivered along the East Coast, and some of us had plans to go to Florida, and we're wondering if we were going to use our VRBO vacation insurance because we couldn't gas our car to get down there. So JBS, the meat company that just got hacked, they paid $18 million. In a time when we've got this overlay of pandemic, so a lot of these meat packers have already had problems. We've had chicken shortages. We've had some beef shortages. We've had pork shortages. JBS gets hacked. It just seems like it's every day you're starting to hear more and more about this. So I would say that it's a very timely issue. Just from my perspective, it's something that certainly I've paid attention to for many years, but and I'm sad to see it on the front page of the news because I'd really hope that we would be further ahead in how we defend at this point in time. Certainly our knowledge of the attackers has grown. I think where we really are a little bit weaker is in our knowledge of the defense piece. And so I think that's, or even the maybe complacency that we've got it all going on, that nobody cares about us. They don't care about you until they get you. And then all of a sudden, like, you really care about it too. So, because it could be the worst day of your life.
Bonnie, when you were with the Center for Cyber Intelligence, I have visions of these huge rooms with lots of monitors. What sorts of things were you looking for? What sorts of things were you monitoring? How much can you monitor in real time, or is it being done retroactively, through phone data? How to put us in there?
Well, I'm not sure I would go with huge monitors. I mean, that's very Hollywoodish. I mean, what you've got are really, really smart people that are paying attention to things that are going on. And so, I mean, we're reading all the same stuff that other people are reading. And, and to remember about the CIA, we really focus, it is a foreign intelligence, okay? So the CIA is really more concerned about what's coming at us from outside of this country. Whereas, law enforcement would be looking at what's coming at us from inside the country, certainly. And in the CIA perspective, we're really looking at nation state, actors, those that are, well, I mean, you could go with like the big three, right? Iran, Russia, China. I mean, right off the bat. North Korea, yeah, too. So law enforcement tends to look more at the criminal element because of the breakup of how things are divided. We're really looking at those things that are coming after the interests of the United States. And so I can tell you that many years ago, I mean, we've known for years. I mean, I can remember as far back as like 2000, I was talking to somebody who said, we just know there's people coming in low and slow and getting stuff. So when I first went to the center, it was 2007. I mean, the questions we were asking at that point in time were really about, what are they getting? Who is it? What are they getting? And then it became, we know who it is. We know what they're getting. How do we stop it? I mean, and so over a period of time, the questions about what was happening started to change. We knew who they were. We knew what they were getting. The big question became, how do you stop this? I mean, General Alexander said years ago that the greatest theft of intellectual property in the history of the world has occurred. I mean, the theft of people's ideas and techniques and technology and research and development has been beyond precedent. And so I think, the stand-up of the new, the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency down in Washington really speaks volumes to the fact that is something we've got to pay attention to. Because this idea that we can just invent more, I mean, speed to market matters. And so if you put all of the R&D into this phone and I steal your technology and I produce a cheaper, not as good a phone, but a cheaper phone that I can get to market faster, what's going to get bought? And so all that R&D that you did, it was worth nothing because somebody stole it and they got to market faster than you did. And people will buy that cheaper, faster produced thing because we're in a pretty disposable society. I mean, it's, what's the next best thing? So there's a lot of things to think about in this space when it comes to what are you protecting? What do you have? What are you protecting? And who wants it? So,
Bonnie,
okay.
Let's have you ask John the first question or two.
Okay.
Because I think you can be more pointed about it.
Yeah, that's great.
Let's bring him in.
Yeah. So, John, you want to say a little bit about who you are and your role in this? I think
Absolutely.
that'd be great.
Well, again, I'm John Langford, and I'm a commercial insurance agent for USI Insurance. And so my role is basically to make sure small businesses, small to middle-sized businesses are secured against any unforeseen incidents that may happen. So things are going to happen. It's our job to help businesses recover from those. And we also try to give them as many resources as possible on trading ideas, safety ideas, to help them head off incidents before they happen, sort of loss mitigation before it happens, and then be there for them on the back end as well to help them get through an event.
Okay, that's great. I mean, and that sums it up nicely. So, but in the cyberspace, so when a company comes to you and says, I think I need cyber insurance.
Sure.
Why do they think they need cyber insurance?
Probably because they saw a news story,
right?
Which is good. I mean, I always tell people that you see stories on the news about the pipeline and about Target and any bank that gets hit, those make the news. But what doesn't typically make the news is when the small business owner gets hit. And when they get hit, it can put them out of business. These big entities recover. It hurts them, but they recover. The small guys, they don't always recover, and they don't always have enough insurance to cover what happened to them. So that's the good and bad about the news only reporting the big incidents, is that that you don't always see the need for your small business, but it at least puts it in their mind of what's going on, and then at some point they are convinced that they need some kind of coverage for that. And so what makes cyber insurance interesting and difficult on an insurance company's basis, on an underwriting basis, is it's a blend of coverages. So you got a blend of property and casualty all into one coverage. So what that means is you've got liability coverage for, what kind of harm you've caused other businesses, other people, because your system got hacked into, or because of this breach. You may have caused somebody that counts on your business to lose business. You may have caused clients to have their personal information stolen. So that pays for that liability, and it also pays for your damage as far as business income loss, as far as anything that's out of pocket to help recover and help pay for a team of people to come in, an incident response team, and clean it up on the back end. So it kind of pays on both ends. So that's what makes it such an interesting and difficult coverage to be underwritten. And we're seeing anywhere from 20 to 50% increases in cyber insurance just in the last 6 months. So it's only going in one direction. It's going up, and that's a lot of it's due to the increase in activity and these type of cyber related incidents.
Yeah.
So to answer your question about how do they know if they need the coverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't always know if they need it. And there's 4 factors there that you have to look at to know if you need that coverage. You need to know, do you have anybody's personal identification information? Do you keep any of that? Do you keep any of their personal healthcare information? Do you manage a network within your company? Is there a network of computers within your company that's being managed? And also, do you take any type of credit card payments? So those are kind of the 4 things there that kind of let you know if you do any of those 4 things, you're going to need a cyber rider on your policy, at least, if not a full-blown standalone cyber policy.
Yeah, actually, I think, I was listening to you because one of the things that you said, but I think bears repeating, is who else are you connected to? Because when you think about, do you have PII or access to somebody else's system that does? Okay. Do you have healthcare information or access to healthcare information based on work that you're doing with another company? Do you manage a network within your company? Are you managing somebody else's data? And then, or are you somehow or other connected to somebody else's network? And then the credit card payments. I mean, certainly the credit card payments are huge. But I think that piece about in the companies that I talk to where we're looking at disaster recovery or business continuity plans, one of the big issues that they're having is who else is connecting into our data? Who else is connecting to our company? Because we all have little vendors out there, right? The little guy that, that dials in to do something. Or even medium size that dials into the bigger company to do something. And, good news travels, but bad news goes so much faster. And so if there's an incident, everybody's going to try to figure out who owns the bad news. And so if it's your company and you're the medium-sized company that somehow or other brought the bad news to the bigger company, there's so many ways this is going to go poorly for you. But that idea that it was, well, I'm a little guy, nobody will pay attention to me, is actually not going to get you off the hook anymore in this space, because people are going to look to you. It's kind of like going in the door and having to sign the form that you haven't been exposed to COVID. So, my brother is a contractor out on the West Coast and builds clean rooms. And he's going into these companies and he says every time he goes and he has to sign that he has not been exposed to COVID. He doesn't know anybody that's been exposed to COVID. All of those things, no fever, no chills, none of those symptoms. And he said, they're going to hold me accountable for that because they're bringing me in to do work for them. And if I'm not truthful on this, they're going to hold me accountable. So I think that's the piece where this cyber connection is going to be really critical to even the small and the medium-sized businesses.
Absolutely. And most of your cyber claims on the insurance side, they're happening from small businesses. They're not all big businesses getting hit. Majority of the incidents are the small guys because they're the easy targets. The bigger companies have bigger systems of checks and balances in place, where your small, HVAC contractor, manufacturer, they don't have those same systems in place as, say a large hospital or a large retailer like a Target.
Right. So let me ask you a question. I always think of this as buying down risk, essentially, understanding that, nobody is not vulnerable. That's a double negative, but there is no way that you are not, unless you are off the internet and you're the only one that uses a computer and, and basically you turn it off and you've got it passworded and everything. So, you don't have any kids running around your house or anything.
Or a phone. Mm-hmm. Can't have a phone.
Exactly. That's the thing, right? It's the old days of like, if you don't want anybody to know your secret, don't tell them. Don't put it on your computer. Don't plug your computer into the internet. So what kinds of things do you look for in somebody that's coming in to help them buy down their policy? How do they buy down risk in cyber?
So essentially, you just want to make sure what kind of records are they keeping. So that's the number one thing. Obviously, most businesses, if they have any type of transactions, they're going to take credit cards. So you're going to have that as a factor. But really, you also want to get into the weeds a little bit and how do they manage their systems? Do they back up their systems and on a regular basis to where, if they were to get a ransom attack, it may or may not affect them. If they've got everything backed up correctly, they can say, we're good. Do what you want to do. We've got a backup. So that's part of it. How do they train their employees? Because that is one of the biggest risks is
number one,
just mishandling of passwords. So so how do you train your employees? And that's a big question to ask, and we try to help give them resources as well to train their employees better on how to identify a phishing attack when you see it. Those are big. You see more incidents take place just because of people clicking on a link or responding to a phishing email that they shouldn't have than anything else. So those are always big. That's when you get into the weeds of underwriting and how they manage all the their multi multi-point authentication.
Right.
When it comes to authentication to get into your system, just what kind of processes. So there's usually an extensive questionnaire that happens, and doorbells ring, and dogs bark.
And dogs bark.
So.
Okay.
but yeah, so those are the main things. I mean, and each underwriter looks at things a little bit different. So,
Okay.
But that's part of the whole process of trying to figure out what's this risk, how big of a risk are they, and how do they understand their own risk. And you combine those two things, and that helps the underwriters get an idea of what they're going to end up charging and what an appropriate level of coverage is going to be for them.
Okay. Can I ask you, I mean, I don't know if you can say or not, but I mean, typically, what's the range of claims that you've seen paid out to smaller companies in cyber, due to cyber issues?
Well, I'm not on the claim side, so I don't
Okay.
see a lot, but I've seen some statistics, and I've talked to some different businesses about incidents that they've had. So you see a lot of businesses now that they get the cyber rider on their policy that might give them $50,000 in coverage. So they've got cyber, they can check the box, they've got cyber coverage, which it's unfortunate that they find out a lot of times the hard way that it's really not enough coverage. So so it can just take one incident, and one company, it was basically an email chain back and forth to buy product. They were buying $80,000 in goods, and didn't realize that there was a hacker that had been watching the email chain back and forth, jumped in at the end, said, here's where you wire the money. And then they played out both sides for 2 weeks, up to 2 weeks afterwards. And so it was $80,000 theft, and they had $50,000 rider on their policy. So that small company was out $30,000 off that one incident. So, of course, they made some changes in how they do things after that, for sure.
So,
as far as dealing directly through internet and through emails. But that's one claim that I've seen firsthand.
And I find it interesting, I'm just going to interrupt you for a minute, that it actually counted as cyber theft or a cyber claim as opposed to regular theft.
Yeah.
Which they probably had more on the loss side of their insurance, and thought that $50,000 in cyber was fine. And yet when it came down to it, it was how it was classified.
Exactly.
As a terrible event.
Yes.
Hey, John.
Yes.
John, so I've got a small business, a marketing business, and I'm thinking through as you're asking these questions. I do have cyber coverage, but more and more, I and other small businesses are using data. For example, my data is on Salesforce. I don't process credit cards from the website. I use QuickBooks and invoice that way, and they process credit card payments. So am I correct in assuming that the more a small business uses these larger services that have a real interest in protecting this data and more ability, greater ability, that probably is reducing our risk because I'm not holding client data. It's all with vendors. Does that help? And then one other about backups. Maybe we could get granular enough that are you aware of if a company has a small server on site, maybe they've got another one parallel off site, or just a small business has a very small server, or maybe it's run off of one laptop. In terms of backup services, do you have any that you're aware of that you recommend on the cloud to do that and to do automated backups and that sort of thing? So talk about first about vendors, using vendors and cloud storage for data, and then anything that you can share about backups.
Anytime you can use the third-party vendors, I think that's helpful, you know. But one thing you have to remember too is in your contracts you sign with these third-party vendors, if something happens and they get breached that they trace back to you, then their contract is not going to be advantageous for you. It's going to be advantageous for them. So if, say, if you had a very weak password and that's how somebody ended up hacking into their system, then they're going to find its way back to you legally and with litigation to come back to you on. So yeah, it's great to use those vendors for sure, because that does help cut down on your risk of, you know, things that you're storing that you're not going to have to worry about so much as your system being hacked. But just keep that in mind, you know, that just because you are outsourcing all that doesn't mean that you don't need to have cyber coverage because you've outsourced all of that. So that's the key thing. And I've had people believe that in the past, and I think we're getting to that point now where people are no longer in belief that they're safe just because they use third-party companies for that type of cloud storage or credit card processing, things like that. As far as companies to recommend, I don't get into that at all when it comes to recommending companies to do that specifically. But I know there are a lot of good third-party vendors out there that you can use, and I think it's a great idea, you know, rather than storing it all yourself. It does help in that regard, but just keep in mind it doesn't keep you clean all the way from any type of a cyber loss or some type of cyber liability that could come back to you.
And plus, I'm also thinking I've got numerous people that access Salesforce, so from different other vendors. So they could get hacked or somebody could come in through there. But also, you know, my information from retail, my retail experience tells me that most retail crime is from the inside. Is that true with cyber? That people are, well, I guess if somebody is being careless with clicking links and that sort of thing, that's sort of bringing it in from the inside. But how much of this, how much of the theft and data theft comes from inside of a company as opposed to an external threat?
I would say if it comes internal, it's probably not going to be as much cyber related as much as it is just theft. If they're using the internal systems to steal, that's going to go down more as just a regular theft crime, which doesn't quite fall into the cyber area as much as other, you know, the hackings and the cyber ransom. Most of your cyber crimes do come from the outside, but a lot of it they get in from the outside because of what's going on the inside. So
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
carelessness.
Bonnie, you got something here.
Yeah. So I would say that, you know, we classify the insider threat as probably the biggest threat. And when you, I mean, exactly what you're saying, right? It's insider is, I mean, it can be the malicious person who just wants, you know, I mean, they just want to disrupt your system because they're mad. You know, it can be somebody who wants to steal from you. And I mean, and the fact that it's, you know, that it's easier to do now that it's all on computer because they can access so much more. You don't have good accesses in place, so they can steal. It can be the person that clicks on the link that basically opens you up to the, you know, the World Wide Web in a way you didn't want to be. It's all of those things, right? Is the insider threat. I think the piece that, you know, that bears repeating is that cyber has made it, it's easier. Okay, it's much more accessible. I mean, motive is always going to find, you know, intent is always going to find a way, right? If I've got motive, I will find a way. Cyber makes it easier. That's all, because it's so much easier to access. What, you know, on the third party piece, Mark, there are some really good companies out there, I will tell you. And, you know, and I know several, and, what I look for typically is, do they come in and look at your systems for compliance? I mean, are they looking at what you're doing to make sure that you're compliant? They assess you for what do you need? I mean, if you're in the healthcare area, they're going to look at HIPAA. If you're in the legal area, they're going to look at, the private client, the confidentiality between, attorney-client piece. I mean, they're going to look for compliance based on what you need to have. And then the other piece of it is, you can get them to do some training with your people. So does it give you a get out of jail free card on any of this stuff? Not really. But at the end of the day, since we've said that, the greatest threat you got is your insider. And I would say that uninformed, unenlightened, kind of casual, I'm just here doing my job, nobody cares about me insider, is probably the one that you want to worry about the most, the one who hasn't been trained, because I click on everything when I'm online. Like, what?
Can we talk a little bit about the PCI compliance? I've been through several of those online audits where they're asking questions. It's usually coming when you engage a new credit card processor, but occasionally through insurance. And my sincere impression is that they are trying to protect themselves. Whoever is asking me to take this thing is trying to trap me into saying something so that if there's an incident, that if it's an insurer, that they don't have to insure me, or they can blame me or come back on me. It doesn't really seem very educational. Is that just me being paranoid, or it doesn't seem to be trying to protect me? It's trying to protect them. Can either of you speak to that?
Sounds a little cynical, I just want to say. Really? Last time you took out financing on your house, which one of those papers protected you? At the end of the day, I think there's maybe it's really about making sure that they've got something that says that they were paying attention. Okay. Because remember, I mean, this insurance thing works all the way up the line, right? So, you're looking at it and saying, well, I think I need insurance. They're looking at it and they need more insurance, and the guy above them needs more insurance. And so it's kind of stair-stepping it up the line, because you're only as strong as your weakest link. I mean, and back to this, basically the home user or the small business or the whatever. I mean, in so many respects, that really is your weakest link. And so you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so if you don't filter that down and basically ripple it down so that everybody owns a piece of that responsibility, then you wind up with it's not my problem, it's his problem. Who's going to come after me? And I think that's a piece of that, Mark, if that makes sense to you. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, sometimes it's easy to get frustrated when you get asked a lot of questions from, say, an underwriter or from somebody like that is trying to assess what you've got going on. And you're right, they are trying to protect themselves, and underwriters are trying to classify the risk and decide if it's eligible or what they want to charge premium wise to insure that risk. But ultimately, the questions they ask are, if you take those to heart, and they're really giving you the ideas on how to protect your business. So it could be a restaurant, they're asking about fire safety equipment, totally off the cyber line, but it falls along the same things. They're wanting to make sure that they're insuring a good risk. And you can use those questions as a guideline to make yourself a good risk, and then ensure that you don't have any issues going forward, because you don't want a claim even if it's covered. so it's a good thing to take to heart, and use that as ways to get better rather than feel like they're just trying to look out for themselves.
Yeah, and I think that was really that was a good way of putting it. You both have the same goal. Your goal is to not need them. Their goal is to not pay. Okay, and so I think that's the piece of it, is you've got to be together in this goal of not having to make a claim versus it doesn't matter if it I've always got insurance. That's just really, you know, it's probably not where I want to default.
Right.
One thing I'd like to talk about, which is a little deviating just a little bit, is just, and one thing that Ed Snowden, one of Bonnie's favorite people in the world,
One of my favorites.
I think communicated to us or communicated to me, is that there is nothing that is secure. There is nothing that is confidential. There's none of my information that's going to stay with me. And again, some cynicism coming out, but I try to live my life in a way that, for example, I have no doubt that my Apple Watch will eventually, if they're not already, communicating to my insurance company, my health insurance company. How often am I walking? What's my heart rate? Anything, any data that they are tracking, I expect that it's at some time it will get to my health insurance company. So do you have any thoughts around, especially you, Bonnie, around do we just live our lives assuming that if we're going to be on a phone, if we're going to be on the internet, that everything is fair game and just don't do it to be safe? How should we live our lives in terms of our expectations of security and confidentiality?
Okay, for starters, turn off your tracking thing on your apps, okay? Except when you're using them. I mean, here's the thing. Several years ago, I was out in San Francisco, and the head of the CEO of a company that was really looking at how do you containerize data, which is, trust me, I mean, these guys have got like amazing brains. And I was just like, okay, containerize it, like pack it in. Made a comment that millennials shed data. And so think about skin cells flying off, right? It says data is a commodity, all right? It is bought, sold, traded, and the goal in 99.9% of the data, the goal is to get to your penny, okay? It really is about getting to your dollar. Okay, there's that other like 0.1% that's really somebody with malice collecting your data to do something. But most of the data that you give off as you go about your day, I mean, this podcast, giving off data, this recording, giving off data, everything sheds data out. It's the data knows who you are already. I mean, it sounds really kind of weird when I say this, but data connects, okay? And it wants to connect because it wants to learn about you. And so this idea that I can have this, I can go over here and I'll whisper in my phone and nobody's going to hear me, or that I can pick up another phone, or I can create another app and somehow I'm untraceable in the data, is really misguided, because we all have patterns of behavior. And the data picks up the patterns of behavior, and where AI is going is more and more linking it together. So here's the bottom line. If you're not doing bad things, don't worry about it. If you're doing bad things, then you got something to worry about. I mean, my bigger complaint is every time I mention something, it shows up on my phone and they want to sell it to me. I mean, that's, if you don't think your phone is listening to you, hello. No, I mean, it's just, that's the way it works, right? You start talking about somebody's health condition, the next thing you know, a bunch of stuff pops up in your news feed about that health condition. It's the way of the world now. It's all out there. And so this idea that, NSA is listening to you, unless you're a terrorist and you're trying to like blow up something in the United States, your chances are pretty slim. So, and they don't listen to US citizens unless they're talking to terrorists who are trying to blow up stuff in the United States. Okay? So stay away from terrorists that want to blow up stuff in the United States. That's the easy one. But I'm always entertained when people go like, oh, do you have a file on me? And, and the first response that comes is like, you think you're that interesting? I mean, really? I'm a boring person. I said, I had a grandson drop in today. I mean, I've got 2 dogs. We've got 2 cars that have like need brake jobs now because I have a son with a heavy foot. So, I mean, this is
you're
kind
going to
of
get
my
brake
life.
ads.
Yeah.
You're going to get brake ads from Mako
Oh, I'm
today.
sure. I tell you what, I wish they'd supply me, like somebody that would drive up here and like fix it for me. I'd pay big bucks. But nonetheless, I mean, most people live everyday, common, ordinary lives. I mean, they're exciting to us because, I mean, I had to lend my son my car, and I'm like, don't bring it back with like dents or like brake problems. That's about as exciting as it got. So
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You mentioned this, and let me give you an example that happened just the other day. And I think Congress is starting to push back on this with the big companies, the phone companies. So a friend of mine mentioned in a group Zoom meeting that she was thinking about going across country and taking her grandson to San Francisco to be with his dad. And she's a senior, so I called her afterwards and I said, you might want to think about the train, taking the train. It'll be a lot easier on you. If you're going through Colorado, it's beautiful. I haven't done it, but I've seen some things. And damn, if the next day, if I didn't get an Amtrak a YouTube video suggested to me about Amtrak going from Chicago to San Francisco. So I think the phone companies get you to agree that they can take Siri data, recording data, for testing purposes, for research and quality purposes. Is that the context by which they're taking this data?
I don't know, but I would, if you really want like some good bedtime reading, go into that end user license agreement, okay? I mean,
Yeah.
Again, buried way, 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 way down there. In fact, I knew somebody that put together an app, that essentially you could put the EULA into it, and it would like pop up stuff that like you'd want to pay attention to. The University of Texas at Austin has an identity management center. And I mean, and they've actually put in a degree program that's all about identity management, really geared toward these places that have got a lot of PII that they're handling, with helping them understand that, I mean, how many pieces of PII does somebody need to have on another individual in order to create like a false identity, right? So it's fascinating how this all thing works. But I would just say, do you have Alexa or anybody in your house? I mean, are you talking to Google?
No, I don't have Alexa very intentionally, but I've got Siri, and that, one thought I had was that we wake up Siri. Mine's probably going to start talking to me here. But when do we tell it to stop listening? So,
anecdotally, I'll tell you, I couldn't get Siri to go away one day, and so she'll pop up now. But I was like, just go away. And this voice says to me, you could be nicer and just say goodbye, Siri. And I thought, I've been chastised by a bot. I mean, like, really? So my phone just told me I need to have better manners. So, but nonetheless, I mean, again, it's all of this data that's flowing. It's the ebb and flow of data. And so, I hate to say give into it. It is kind of a give into it. I would just say, watch what tracks you. I mean, I don't like being tracked, so I turn off the tracking stuff unless I'm in the app, in which case, if you're going to use a GPS app, it obviously needs to know where you are. So, but a lot of this stuff, they don't need to know where you are. And besides that, it drains your battery, because think about what it's bouncing off of all the time. Because I mean, it shows where you are. Your car knows where you are. I mean, all of the, all the computerized stuff that's in a car, I mean, it knows where you are. I mean, I can, go to, my Subaru right now and figure out where my car is. That's easy. And I could unlock the doors or lock the doors wherever he is. So there's so much now. It's ubiquitous is what I would say. So I think you kind of swirl back to this idea that, like somebody's listening to you, and I think you kind of meant U.S. government.
No,
Yeah. Okay.
not really. I didn't.
I would say that your chances are pretty good that someone's listening to you, but what they really want is your money.
Right.
Okay. I mean,
They want
it's
to
trying
sell
to
you
figure out how to
something.
get to that percentage of a cent, you know. You walk down the street. I mean, if I get near a Starbucks and I've allowed locator services on my Starbucks app, trust me, Starbucks pops up. Good time for a cup of coffee, you know, special today. You know, I mean, before too long, you'll have Starbucks saying, hey, come in and get a cup of coffee, and the bakery next door will say, and then come here and get a donut.
Mhm.
I mean, this is the
So-
way it's working.
So we probably should wrap it up. And John, let me give you an opportunity to give your best pitch to your best clients that you haven't shared before. What do you want them to know? What do you want to warn them about? What do you want to suggest?
Well, thanks for having me on, Mark. First off, I appreciate this. I've had a good time. So really what it boils down to is, do you know how much cyber you have? Do you know how much you need? There's one thing that a broker should do for you is to help you determine that amount of coverage that you need, and that's what we do. So we check that box. We help you figure out how much do you have, how much do you really need, and then secondly, we give you the tools and resources to help mitigate a future loss, respond to a future loss, and just have your employees trained to avoid phishing emails, clicking on certain things. So we kind of help give you the tools and resources for your money, because you're going to buy this coverage from somewhere, but we give you more than just the coverage. We give you the resources to go along with that. So one thing that we also do, we didn't even dive into in this conversation, is cryptocurrency and how that has made it so much easier for these cyber crimes to take place. Well, if somebody takes control of your system, they're going to ask for a ransom in cryptocurrency. Do you have cryptocurrency on hand? We do. We will have the cryptocurrency to pay for the ransom if that's what it comes to. You won't be on your own to go out and find the cryptocurrency on your own. So these are the main reasons why you should have your insurance with USI, is that we put our resources back into our clients, not into naming stadiums or commercials during the Super Bowl halftime.
How can people reach you? Best way to reach you?
Best way to reach out to me is my email address is john.langford@usi.com. That's the best way to reach me. And you can also reach me by phone, 502-718-8961.
And are you restricted by geography? Can you help any business anywhere?
We have locations in all 50 states, so we can help you with your insurance no matter where you're located.
Awesome. Bonnie, give us your best advice that you haven't shared.
I would listen to John, to be really honest with you. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, it's not what you think you have, it's what you don't know that you have that's going to get you. And so, you know, if you are a small business and you're at all on the internet, you're all working with others, you've got that data, make sure you're insured, because, you know, as we said, $30,000 for a small business could be a make or break. I mean, that's payroll and then some. So don't get caught underinsured. I mean, even Target is litigating it out, and that's, you know, 15 years after the fact. So pay attention to what's going on, pay attention to what you've got, and don't assume that nobody cares. You know, I mean, I think that's really the biggie.
You know, one afterthought is, do people try, when they get threatened and blackmailed, do they tend to want to clam up and not report these things, and then deny themselves? I was thinking about the cryptocurrency, and deny themselves some resources that you could provide. So they probably are scared and might tend to try to solve it themselves, just like not reporting workers' comp claims. Is that something that you see or hear about?
I think that always happens in insurance. I mean, depending on the type of client that you have, you know, some take a lot of pride in not having a lot of claims. So if they see something that happens that they feel like they can handle on their own, they may try to. And when it comes right down to the cyber, it's really not something that you want to handle on your own. You want to bring in an expert to come in and help get you through this problem. I mean, you're going to need somebody to diagnose how it happened in the first place so it don't keep happening. So that's the main thing. I mean, it's not like a fire. You know, you had a faulty wiring and you get it fixed. You had a fire and it's all good. It's different than that. Once they find a way in on you once, word gets out and they'll be right back in 6 months.
Well, and the other piece of it is what's the reporting that has to go on at that point? I mean, because even though you think you've got it contained, I mean, is there something that has to be reported someplace? I mean, if you're a healthcare provider, you're going to have to report. I mean, you know, I would assume that you guys have got experts that can come in and help manage some of that piece too, or certainly give advice to where to go to get somebody to come in and help you manage the reputational piece. What's the report? I mean, what's the compliance issues? So, I mean, there's just so much more. You know, it's just the good news that just keeps giving. That's all there is to it. So,
well, I really enjoyed this, learned a lot, and I hope and trust that our listeners did, or viewers did too. So I really appreciate both of you being on. I like the chat between the two of you and questioning between the two of you. I thought that was really good. So thanks so much. Let's see, Bonnie, let's give contact information for you. How do people reach you? And let's be sure they understand where you would come in this situation. You know, why would a company use you, and how do they reach you?
Absolutely. There's a couple of things I can do. I certainly have a lot of contacts in the cyber world to help you take a look at what you got and maybe give you some advice on managing your insider threat. And certainly looking at your systems and making sure that, you know, that you've got what you need to be as secure as you can be. Understanding 100%, not possible. And I would just tell you, there's no silver bullet. Anybody that tells you they've got the silver bullet, they're going to charge you a lot of money and you're still going to be really, really vulnerable. The other piece that I bring is working with leaders to create the culture where people want to pay attention to this kind of thing. And so your weakest link is basically that piece that's the human piece. And so if you get your employees involved in this, your chances of keeping most of it out or all of it out are so much greater than if you decide that you're just going to hand it over to the IT people and let them handle it and it'll all be good. Because you've got to get everybody involved in it. So I work with leaders who want to go from good to great. I certainly work with companies who are looking to build an engaged culture so that they can accomplish greater things with that culture, one of them being better cybersecurity. And then going in and working with companies on their cyber, I certainly have a lot of resources I can bring to bear in helping them address those issues.
And how do people reach you?
Sure, it's I'm at Apex Leadership and cybercoaching.co. And so I can be reached online. My email is bonnie@Apex Leadership and cybercoaching.co. So send me a note.
Is it CO or is it com?
It's co.co. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again to both of you. This was very rich in information, and let's keep an eye out for the next incident, and maybe we'll come back and just talk about that incident and the implications and consequences. So thanks so much, and everybody that's been viewing, if you'd like to see more podcasts, and this is a business podcast, Thrive Business, go to our website, thrivecolivingcommunities.org, and look at the podcast page. You can sign up for notifications on the for the podcast. There are lots of ways you can support the site as well as the podcast, Patreon being the newest one. And we'll have information in the show notes about each of our guests and about how you can reach out and support Thrive Co-Living Communities. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another great episode of the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. To learn more about our mission and how you can support our vision of creating co-living communities worldwide, please visit us at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. To receive advanced viewings of our podcast and other exclusive content, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Thrive Co-Living Communities. You can also learn more ways to support our mission in the show notes below. Amazon Smile, GoFundMe, Kroger, and our own Thrive Gear store, where you can buy t-shirts, hats, and many other items. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.